This is the story of the Minotaur, the monster who was never meant to exist. Beneath the island of Crete, there is a place where sound slowly dies, not all at once, but piece by piece. Footsteps echo back wrong, as if the walls are whispering your movements to something deeper inside. The air grows colder the further you walk, thicker, heavy with the smell of damp stone and old fear. The labyrinth is not a maze, it is a stomach. It swallows direction, light, and hope, and begins to digest you long before anything touches your skin. People who enter don't collapse immediately. They wander. They call out. They follow voices that aren't real. And somewhere in the dark, something listens. The labyrinth was never meant to hold a monster. It was meant to make sure the monster was never hungry. By the time anyone realized they were lost, their legs were shaking, their throats were raw from screaming, and their minds were already breaking. They were not being hunted. They were being prepared. Prepared to be digested by someone who never even asked to be there. King Minos once stood on the shore of Crete, staring at a bull that had risen from the ocean. It wasn't just beautiful. It felt wrong to look at, like staring directly at something divine. White as sea foam, strong as stone, alive with the approval of a god. Minos promised Poseidon he would sacrifice it, but when he placed his hand on its warm hide, he hesitated. Because power, once tasted, is difficult to give back. So Minos lied. He kept the bull and hoped the sea wouldn't notice. The Minotaur wasn't born from sin. He was born because of a king who was afraid to lose his power. But, of course, the sea noticed. Although Poseidon didn't act right away and didn't take it out on Minos, he had a plan in mind. He decided to take it out on Pasiphae. And in that moment, a curse disguised as love was born. Pasiphae did not wake up in love. She woke up wrong. Her thoughts were no longer hers. Her heart beat too fast. Her breath felt tight in her chest. Poseidon had reached inside her mind and twisted it, not to make her desire, but to make her suffer. Every glance at the bull filled her with a hunger that made her sick. She cried. She prayed. Nothing stopped it. What grew inside her was not a child. It was a consequence. When the baby was born, it did not cry like a human infant. It sounded confused, as if it had been placed into the wrong body. Half boy, half beast, and entirely unwanted. The Minotaur was not created to live. He was created to make someone else suffer. So they hid him and dared to call it mercy. The labyrinth became his world. Cold walls, endless corridors, the echo of his own breathing returning to him like another presence. He learned which tunnels felt safe, which corners swallowed sound, where shadows seemed to move even when nothing was there. He didn't know words, but he knew loneliness. When the first children were thrown inside, he smelled them before he saw them. Fear has a scent. He walked toward it, Slowly, curiously, one of them whispered. One of them cried for their mother. Then they saw him, and the screaming began. Violence was not his nature. It was the only language anyone ever used with him. Something broke inside the boy, and something monstrous took its place. "14 children every year, 7 boys and 7 maidens. Some tried to be brave. Some prayed. Some simply sat down and waited. The labyrinth took them all the same. They followed voices that led nowhere. They ran until their legs gave out. They called for help until their voices became whispers. When the Minotaur found them, they were no longer people. They were trembling shapes in the dark." The Minotaur was never the hunter. He was the final step of a system designed to kill, and every death erased more of what little humanity he had left. Hope did not enter the labyrinth unarmed. It carried the weight of a forgotten promise. Theseus did not simply step into the labyrinth. He was sent there, a youth chosen from Athens, bound to an ancient and merciless tradition. A tradition created by King Minos. Long before he reached Crete, Theseus had already accepted a burden meant for him. As a child, he had been told of a stone, and beneath it, a sword and a pair of sandals, left by a king who could not yet claim his son. When Theseus was strong enough to lift the stone, he took what lay beneath it. The sword was not forged for glory. It was proof of blood, duty, and a path that could not be refused. That was the blade he carried with him to Crete, not as a weapon of conquest, but as a reminder of who he was and what would be asked of him. Before he stepped inside, someone chose to intervene. Ariadne, daughter of Minos, saw what others refused to see. The maze was not built to contain a monster. It was built to bury a truth. She gave Theseus a thread, not to help him kill, not to ensure victory, but so that someone would return, so the story would not vanish into the dark. He walked into the labyrinth knowing the tradition he was part of. Stone corridors closed around him, their silence heavy with the absence of all who had entered before. Theseus moved carefully, unspooling the thread behind him. Each turn tested his resolve. Whispers drifted through the stone, echoes of young voices long lost, calling out where no one could answer. And then he saw him, the Minotaur, not charging, not roaring. For a long moment, neither moved. Only then did Theseus lift the sword he had carried so far. Time slowed. And then steel met flesh. The Minotaur fought like something that had endured pain for far too long. He was not cruel. He was desperate. The blade found its mark. When the Minotaur fell, he let out a final roar. For a moment, Theseus did not move. He did not raise the sword again. He did not celebrate. He stood alone with what he had done, in a silence that felt heavier than the labyrinth itself. The Minotaur was never the villain. He was the proof. Proof of a king's lie. Proof of a world that chose to hide its sins instead of facing them. And when the Minotaur died in the dark, what vanished with him was not a monster, but the last living reminder of a crime the world hoped to forget.